Yeah? Yes, please, yes! Yes, yes, yes! Oh, this is... So, as a thing, Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie because of how Luke's arc is handled.
We were using a submersible reconnaissance droid in the ocean surrounding Otto City, and it was damaged. It took a data recording of the outside of the city before being driven off by the fluorescent sharks.
So,
but while it was returning to the surface,
one of the things. So I'm gonna talk a bit about. I will just hold forth about Luke Skywalker's arc for the time being, and if anybody has commentary, throw it in. So for one thing, let's look at Luke Skywalker's arc as...
The droid's data centers are heavily encrypted, so it will take the Sith several days,
right, but it goes into... The idea of the redemption arc kind of brings up this thing from Skyrim, Parthenox's question of goodness. And that is it better to be good because it is your nature, or is it better to be good because you are fighting a nature that is not good? And my answer is always, they are the same value, because you are doing good. There is no difference. There's no, you may need more support if you are fighting your nature. But that's why you have good people around you. You surround yourself with good people to support your good works, right? So I don't think there's a superior thing. There's no need that once you enter into that, you've left the, as Gandalf says, only anyone who would break a thing to understand it has left the path of wisdom. Are you fighting your nature, or are you fighting urges? And this gets into what is our nature, and is our nature changeable? Lamarck says yes. Lamarck says yes. And evolution is a combination of Lamarckian and Darwinian principles. So I'm going to throw that out there for everybody. But either way, so the idea of the redemption arc being superior to a good hero's arc, I think I look to Captain America as proof positive, especially the way he was handled in the MCU, as proof positive that you don't need to come from a bad place to have a challenging, character-driven story. So Lamarck put forth that evolution occurs because of practices of parents that are passed on to children through the genetic code. Modern genetics is showing that that is actually something that happens, that as we go through life, as we exercise, as we learn things and practice things, our genes actually change. And so, especially for men, where we're constantly regenerating genetic material, there's evolution going on. There's change going on. So that when we do have children, if we do have children, those changes pay forward. What's that? He's the one who theorized giraffes' necks would grow to reach... Yes, yes. And yeah, that was his example.
It's heavily guarded. That is what... There are several leads we've been working on to get into the Sith base. The first method that's possible is to help us interrogate a Sith prisoner we managed to catch after he tried to infiltrate our base. We think he may be able to give us the passcode that he has proved most... We managed to pick up a crate of blank Sith data cards, the type they use for passcards. The encryption system to unlock them is...
But yeah, then so I think a lot of genetics, and I was talking to the Jolly Green Giant about this.
Good. It is a very intelligent and skilled individual who can crack the matrices of a Sith encryption system. But there is one last method you should know about in case all other options fail. The Sith have got the Selkath to give them exclusive use of one of the main hangar bays. Visiting Sith Masters use this bay to land, then take a speeder over the water to an external entrance to the Sith enclave. The luckless spy...
But yeah, let's get back to the Star Wars thing. So, Luke's arc. Let's start with the fact that he is a product of his time. And that is not an excuse for the things I'm going to be bringing up. It is simply, we must look at it in context to fully understand why the character is the way they are. So Luke fits the standard archetype of the kind of big-eyed, innocent farm boy hero, right? Very, very standard part of storytelling, right?
Good choice. We've been working at that for a while, but it's been too difficult so far. Maybe you'll have better luck. I wish you luck in your task. Should you retrieve the data recording from the droid, return it here to me, and we can see about getting you that information.
Well, that was easy. So the reason I bring that up is because I think it's important to look at representation at the time. Leia was really good representation, in all frankness, at the time. In a majority male cast, she shows up in a way that really you only saw in... You only saw in literature for the most part. You didn't really see it in a lot of movies. You had strong female characters, certainly, but in terms of sci-fi and fantasy, a lot of times the purpose of the female character is to be rescued, to be the damsel in distress. Whereas what we see with Leia is, for one thing, yes, captured. Yes, in distress, to a degree. However, deeply independent, strong-willed, resistant, and resilient. And I think that complements Luke in a way that made the future revelations of their story correct. Yet, well, sort of. She had to contribute to her rescue in a meaningful way, because they were... For one thing, if you think about it, it makes sense. She was being raised in a tactical thinking. She was being raised in tactical thinking, in this larger way of thinking that Luke and Han didn't have. That is true. That is very true. Alright. What am I doing here? I still need to do that. Very strategic. Leia? Yes. Yeah. Leia was very strategic and very much tactical. Is a tactical thinker. Versus Luke, who's a farm boy. You know, he's the farm boy. He's probably great at sniping, which is standard for a farm boy. And he's a good pilot. Because he's got his hot rod T-16 back home, from which he would zap womp rats. Right? And that's another thing that kind of pays forward into the sequel trilogy, is this idea of the simple person who lives a slightly isolated life, but ends up with the skills they need to become a hero. And that's Luke in a nutshell. You know, he has what he needs. He has this very deeply entrenched simplicity of farm life that gives him a good base, a good moral base from which to start his adventure. And he's got piloting skills, which end up paying off at the end. Now, what he doesn't have is the Magic Knight skills, which is where our wizard character comes in. Now, George Lucas was heavily inspired by Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, which puts forth the idea that all heroic stories follow a specific arc. Now, modern literary analysis, modern mythological analysis, historical and literary analysis shows that this is not the case. That's not how it works necessarily. There are a sufficient number of subversions that is just not how things work. It's just that there are a lot of examples of that being the case, and there are a lot of examples of that not being the case. So, why are you just standing here in a corner, bro? Let's see what you got. Pazak cards. These are some good Pazak cards. Maybe another time. I am not wasting a lot of time on Pazak. Then it's going to be like Gwent. So yeah, so Hero with 1,000 Faces. So the cycle, the heroic cycle that that Campbell put forth was the hero receives the call to adventure, denies the call to adventure, travels, it is then turned towards the path, is forced into the adventure, travels to the underworld, this other world, to obtain to obtain something, to learn something, to receive training and experience, and to obtain their unique weapon, which is another aspect of the character. Along this path, they have a guide, and that guide is usually the wise man. Oh, hey, swoop races.
This street is for Sith only. You gotta pay a 20 credit toll to walk down this street. Hiding behind the Selkat laws. Typical Republic cowards.
I see. Well, you know, you're a jerk. By the by, I have no idea what I am doing. There are signs, but there's nowhere to go. Interesting. Ah, there's a door. I have no idea. Yortal's Emporium. Yeah, sure, let's check out Yortal's Emporium.
You got any armor plating for my swoop bike?
And a real bargain at that price. I see. But yeah, character explorations.
I
So
thought this garbage was free.
if we apply,
You actually
so
sell
then,
this junk?
so you receive
You
travels to
fish
the
are a
other
strange
world
breed.
to receive training and experience and magic items and things like that. And then they return to their world with these gifts to use them in service of the story, in service of the people, and to defeat the villain, right? To overcome
Don't worry,
whatever
Junkman. When I
hardship
want
is
garbage,
occurring.
I'll be back.
And cool. Interesting. So if we apply this to Luke, what we have is there's the first part of the arc where the droids, the call to adventure comes through R2-D2, where he goes off and follows R2-D2 to find his wise man, his counselor, his guide in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi completes the call to adventure by saying, "You have to come with me. You must come with me to Alderaan if you wish to learn the ways of the Force." You know, and he denies it. He says, "I can't do that. I'm a farm boy. I gotta go do farm things." That is your uncle talking. You know, it goes on and on and on. So he denies it. He goes. He's taking Obi-Wan to the port, gives him a ride, and they find the Jawas. And Luke realizes, oh God, if they track them to the Jawas, they can track them to the farm. Goes off and finds the farm destroyed. This is going to go well. Let's talk to the Sith diplomat. Why not?
Only people who have business with the Sith are allowed.
I have business with the Sith. Ha! I'll be
Go.
going.
Stay.
You sound like a real jerk. which you're Sith. That tracks. So Luke has the dial. He goes back to Ben, accepts that he has to travel with Ben at this point because there's nothing else for him, and so begins his adventure. In this case, his arc carries through the other two movies. If we look at Star Wars as a standalone, which it certainly can be. I want to head back to the Ebon Hawk real quick. It can be seen as a standalone. Then it's giving us the hint of things to come. This idea of fulfillment of the heroic arc. Now, am I able to work on the swoop? I'm not able to work on the swoop. Okay. Which that's not what most swoops look like, but I digress. Okay. Well, let's... So then we have to continue down the other two movies to follow the rest of Luke's arc, because right now we're kind of left off with, oh, he's a hero. He solved the major problem that he was facing. But if we apply the rest of the filter of the heroic cycle, he used a modicum of what he was
Kipuna na bonsha. Kavadumpa kupaliaya mokarpata.
Okay. Enjoy. Okay, cool. Never mind that. Vec. Is there any other? No. Okay. Just wondering if I could find Griff. So we do see somewhat of a completion, because we see this he uses the Force for the first time, right? Okay, where exactly is this? The data module stolen by the Sith, and bring it back to him before he'll tell you everything. Okay. Well, that's what I plan on doing. So let's head back and do the thing. So we have this. It certainly fulfills the story, but there's more to it, and we can feel that. There's a certain amount of, well, he has this lightsaber. Why didn't he use it? What's with his father's lightsaber? And what is the Force? What does it really mean? How did he use it? And what can we do? Like, what does what are the Jedi? What are we don't really hear the term Dark Lord of the Sith until later, and no, I don't want to deal with the Sith prisoner. Restricted access. Okay, well that probably means that I can't go that way. So there's a lot left. There's a lot left to explore.
You're the one who's gonna try to get into the Sith base, eh? Huh, good luck. You're gonna need it. This is our main computer room here. We got the box of passcards we got from the Sith, but we haven't been able to break their encryption yet. We have been able to decode the numeric system they use, but there are holes in our terminal sequence patterns. The strings of numbers that end the code sequences. If we could complete those strings,
so there's
we would have
obviously a
the
larger
encryption
arc
system.
for Luke to
The
complete,
encryption
but we
system is
have a
composed of
complete
6
arc in the
phases,
first Star
each is
Wars
based on a
movie
mathematical
to
method.
just kind of
The
gnaw,
holes we're missing are the final number in each of the
sit with
strings.
and use
Most
as
are
a
simple,
base,
but the
right?
final 2 matrices seem to be
So
much
if
more
you want to
difficult.
think of it
The
as,
second last matrix has a
if
pattern
we
moving
take
back
that
on itself,
first
or something.
piece
And
of
the last is
story
divided into smaller
in A New
subparts.
Hope and
The
ignore
path for
everything
that
else
is
that came
video
after,
storage.
if it
But I
failed
have to
then,
admit, all this
we
isn't
have a
right over my
complete
head.
arc,
I haven't even
and
been able to
you
slice
could
past the
build
first
a,
matrix.
say,
I've been
a
at this for
role-playing
hours.
game setting
I've
off
ruined
of
a
it.
dozen
You could
cards
do
already.
video
But
games
the
off
good
of
thing
it.
is
You could
we
do a
have a whole
ton
box
with
of them,
it.
so you don't have to worry about running
So
out
if it was a
anytime soon.
cult hit
Since Roland said you were
instead of
good, you can
a
use the computer freely.
bombastic,
I'll be here if you have
amazing,
any
revolutionary
questions.
film in terms of marketing and everything else, you would still have this sense of the hero's arc contained within it, but a lot of questions unanswered. Then you move on to Empire Strikes Back. And here is where we see the extension of the arc into the trilogy. Because the story does not complete, and it introduces a lot of new things. There are certain mutations of the hero's arc that Lucas introduces, and we have to remember that Lucas was the storyteller throughout all of this. He was the one who was writing the stories, and then Larry Kasdan did the direction for Empire and Return. And by Return, Lucas saw the need for marketing to go alongside his introduction to philosophy class that is the Star Wars universe. It's very, very simple. But it serves as an interesting introduction to different ideas. Did I save? I already saved, right? Yeah, okay. Large computer.
What can I do?
I never did get why they didn't just have R2 units. Why they built, like, these four-legged droids. Because that's something that's consistent in a lot of the Star Wars games. Oh, here we go. +1, +3, +4, +5, +6. So, accessing subtractive matrix. -3, -2, -1, 0, +1, +2. Multiplicative. Okay. That just never works. That first sequence always stinks. But you take it as said, because it's not actually the multiplicative matrix they're applying does work logically, but there are certain symbols that are missing. But I digress. 2 times 6, 16 times 2 is 32. Oh, so this isn't even a multiplicative matrix. This is geometric progression. Divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, 2. Exponential. What? Should that be 36? This one's weird. But that should be 4 times 4. Should be that's not how that should work. Oh God. I don't want to know. I'm going to assume this because it's an exponential matrix. Okay. Logarithmic. Okay. What the devil is this doing? 1 0 8 3 32 5 128. Okay, so 7. So then we get to Empire, and we see this larger arc appear, and we see Luke's journey to the other world, which is Dagobah, and his acceptance of the Jedi ways, his acceptance of Jedi training, and his pursuit of understanding the Force and his unique weapon, his father's lightsaber. Which, if you want to see something really cool, Mark Hamill talks about the lightsaber in the context of legendary swords in one of the prequel specials. There's what DVD was that? Might have been one of the originals. So if you have the box set DVD Star Wars. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the original trilogy. And it's the silver box set. And I should have that creeping around here somewhere. But he geeks out about the idea of lightsabers being strong enough you have to use 2 hands. And that's something that they went with until... like, that was a major thing. And then they switched Vader to using 1 as part of his big intimidating thing. Like, he is that strong. Which I thought was cool. 1083325. I'm gonna guess 7. Screw it. Okay. Two plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. 11 plus 5. 16. 16 plus 6 is 22. Okay. 15, 16. Minus 3. Minus 2, minus 1. 0, plus 1, plus 2. Yeah. Multiplicative, 64. 128, 64, 2, yeah, 2. Okay, exponential. It's 9. 128, so it's not 7. It says, my problem is they're using the term logarithmic. Is it really logarithmic? But, yeah, so we see Luke. I keep doing that, too. I need to get rid of the so's. We see Luke go to Dagobah and engage the other world, the idea of the Force, this mysterious power that we haven't really heard explained, and we see that it gives tremendous power and strength to the mystics who train to use it. And that's kind of all the explanation we get. We get that it's something that connects everything. It's something that's really deep and infinite. And how that ties into philosophy, because it doesn't just show up in Eastern philosophy. I know that's Lucas did a lot of pulling from Eastern philosophy, like Zen and Taoism, and the idea of the samurai and things like that, because that was the zeitgeist in the 70s and 80s, was samurai and ninjas, and only the East has worthwhile philosophy, and only the East has worthwhile martial arts. So we're going to pull from that to do all the things. Alright, I'm going to guess 8. Hey! Oh, darn it. What? Oh, yeah. Yeah, that. Hey, Revan! You're just in time. We're talking about Luke's heroic arc, as Luke's Campbellian hero arc. So we're at the point where Luke is in Dagobah, and he's training, and he goes deep into the underworld and faces his challenge, which his challenge is in the tree. And Kloppy, hey! And the tree reveals to him this sense of ugh, it's ridiculous. What did I guess? I guessed something last time, didn't I? Then we see Luke come out of the test shaken, because he had given into habit and fear and these animal things that the Force predates on, really. That the dark side of the Force is the Force as predator, as the unconscious nature of nature, the animal of nature, that it's the predator and prey. And you start seeing that cycle in the Sith. This is the first place this kind of shows up, of the Force being predatory in nature. That's part of nature, is this animal instinct, and it's only by overcoming that you really gain access to the higher function of the Force, the ability to move with the Force and have the Force move with you. And the Sith give into that more animal side of it. They give into hunger and prey, the fear and anger and emotion. They give into their bodies, really. They give into their lymph system, their hormones, and that's how they get their power. But the Jedi train to consciously use the Force, and that's their strength. And so there's strength in both sides, and it's very different strength. And one is progressive strength, and that's the Jedi, because you can constantly grow your consciousness. You can constantly grow this relationship that is more about relating to it and being empathetic, and that relationship is growth-based versus the domination-based way of the Sith. Pardon me just a moment. Okay, so which one is it? Alright, this is driving me up a wall. So that's what's illustrated, at least to a degree, in Dagobah, is this sense of when you give into fear and you give into your habits and your base nature, the dark side preys upon you. The Force as hungry instinct rather than guiding insight. Which also goes into how you engage the Force is how the Force engages with you. It's reactive. It's reactive to your approach. Pardon me while I get distracted again. What number haven't I used? I feel like I've used all the numbers. I swear to God, I've used every one of these numbers. Well, I want to try something. Okay, so... That's not it. That's what it... Okay, that's what I'm getting wrong. But wait a minute. 7 plus 4 is 11. Because 7 plus... 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. 11 plus 5 is 16. And 16 plus 6 is 22. Right. Okay. 21 minus 3 is 18. 18 minus 2 is 16. 16 minus 1 is 15. 15 minus 0 is 15. It's a subtractive matrix. (15 plus 1 is 16. But it's a subtractive matrix. Um, yeah. To it, yes, yeah. Right. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of what the adventure on Dagobah shows. And if we follow through the prequel trilogy into Yoda's training, then I think it illustrates what you're saying very, very well. And Luke completes his trial in the tree, comes out of it shaken, and never really gets hold of his deeper self. Never really fully trains to heroic status. And so he leaves early. He leaves his training early. He abandons the quest a second time in this case, because the quest is ultimately his knighthood. Like, that is his quest, is ultimately becoming his better self, and using that in service to the Republic, or the Rebellion. And in leaving Dagobah, leaving behind the other world before he is ready, he enters into this permutation of the hero's journey that involves a second failure, a return to the other world for other reasons. And that's what happens on Cloud City, is we see this fight between he and his nemesis, and the twist that occurs there, and the nature of their relationship. And he's cast down, he has failed in his heroic journey, it looks like. And that's where we end Empire, is this, there's this diaspora of the heroes, and things are not looking great. You know, the one person that they've pinned their hopes on has failed in his task, and that's not great. I'm gonna try this. Okay, that's multiplicative. Divisive, that makes sense. Exponential. Oh yeah, I've seen Andor. Oh, is that good? So that's where we end Empire. Is the heroes are scattered. Luke is reconfronting. He's maimed, which is something that happens again in the heroic arc. That if the hero does abandon their quest in the other world before they're ready, they end up maimed. They lose something to they essentially sacrifice it to survive, in order to try to regain themselves. And so we learn, and this is something that I kind of find interesting about the sequel trilogy and the return to the Graflex saber, because Luke loses the Graflex at the end of Empire, and the Graflex is the original saber with the blue blade, or white in the original movie, and Kloppy, you're gonna love it, I can tell you. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. It's, oh god. Well, I think I said it before, it's like all the other Star Wars series. I played with Star Wars figures when I was a kid, and now I get to make adventures of my own. And then Andor is, only violence can overcome entrenched fascism. And it's like, wow, dude, whoa, there is no chill here, and I am here for it. I think Mando deals with some serious themes, but it's behind the usual mask of overt action that does not show up in Andor. So I would not say that Mandalorian or Andor are more or less serious than each other. It's they handle the material differently. I want to chat with you about that at some point. Just what elements didn't work for you, but that's a conversation for another time. So we come to the beginning of Return of the Jedi, and we see in a hidden scene that didn't make it, or it's a scene that somebody filmed and added on as a fan thing, the building of a new lightsaber. And we're not sure how that works or what have you. No, you're fine. You're fine. If I wasn't off topic, I wouldn't have a topic at all. So we begin Return of the Jedi with the absence of heroes, really, as it is in the theater. We come back to the galaxy far, far away, and the first characters that we know that we're introduced to are 3PO and R2, who it kind of is this mythological arc. This is how the first movie started, that the droids are in trouble. And I'm gonna try this again. Swear to God, I'm gonna have to look up this solution because I swear it's driving me nuts. But I want to finish this thought first because this is an interesting line of thought, and I keep getting I'm distracted by my line of thought and then the game, and I don't know which one I want to pay attention to. So I'm gonna pay attention to my line of thought right now. So we begin Return of the Jedi with the only two characters we recognize from the previous two movies as R2 and 3PO, but it's a return to the first film in that we're seeing R2 and 3PO in this place of distress. And Han is now the damsel in distress. He's been captured, and a rescue is being mounted for him by his friends. And so now we see the other two of this triangle of Luke and Leia and Han being together and being like, they complement each other's idiocies. That Luke and Leia are now mounting a rescue for Han, and it doesn't work out exactly as planned, but it works out according to some projection that Luke had. So we start seeing that Luke has progressed in his skills, and we see a new lightsaber, which is more unique than the last. Because right now, we've only seen two colors, and now we have this new, unique weapon. And that opens, of course, the floodgates for lightsabers of all hues. And I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of a lightsaber being hued according to the wielder's personality and spirituality and connection to the Force. They're unique, and that gets into Neo-Confucianism, and that shows up in Demon Slayer, actually, the idea of a blade or a weapon taking on some attribute of its wielder. And so we also start seeing this idea of the Force being more nuanced, the Force being more complex than we had first seen, because we see Luke in black and bad guy clothes. You know, he's in black, and he chokes out two dudes at the beginning, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? That's like dark side points, to use the West End system, and yeah, that's what I thought. Ugh, fine. I'm gonna go do something else so that I can talk and play at the same time. There we go. So we see Luke wield this unique lightsaber, this new and this new color that we didn't realize was even a possibility before, and it's his. Now, mind you, there's a technical reason for it that's not in the story, and the explanation is the blue didn't show up great against the Tunisian sky, so they had to switch to a different color, so they went with a more complementary green. But it still gives us more to chew on. It gives us more to chew on that is not necessarily intended, but it still presents it. So the rescue goes off, not without a hitch, because we are talking about the three idiots here. But it does go off, and Han is saved, and we're able to continue with the adventure. In this case, Luke returns to Dagobah. And he asks to complete his training, and he is told, you're done. There is only a task left before you, and it is your final test. So we get the impression that Luke has been training on his own, or he's done something else. Something has happened to transform Luke into something more than he was, but not who he is meant to be. And Yoda talks to him about, like, okay, no, I don't have anything more to teach you. You've learned everything I can teach you. And he's like, I am a Jedi. And he's like, oh, not yet. Not yet, you're not. You still have something to do. Get out there and do it, whippersnapper. And we have revelations about Luke's relationship to the other characters, and we have this kind of almost prophetic idea of the Chosen One, and different things about what that means, and what it could mean for the future of Luke and his allies, and just all these implications, and talk about insight and emotion, and how emotion can be used to leverage for the dark side versus the insight that we get from it. Again, kind of hinting at this idea that emotion is not inherently bad, but it needs to be filtered, it needs to be used, it needs to be consciously examined so that we can incorporate it and use it in a meaningful way. That it can motivate us or it can manipulate us. And that's kind of what Obi-Wan starts talking about in that movie, where he's talking to Luke about, insight and connection is not a bad thing, but it can be used in service to the dark side. And so all of those things need to be kind of run through the old processor in order to have them strengthen you instead of weaken you. So we progress, and the rebels are about to fight a second Death Star battle because the bad guys in Star Wars are obsessed with gigantic weapons that blow up planets. I don't know. It's the Sith and the rule of two. What can I say? So we have this... Okay, what else can I do here? Okay, yeah. I mean, I suppose I could just... Oh, I could assault the hangar. That would be fun. Okay, I need to break in there anyway. Technological monstrosities are fun. Yeah, I guess they kind of are, aren't they? Go big or go home. I mean, that is the, I always love the analysis of Pacific Rim in that vein, and I'll get to that in a moment. Alright, I gotta do this thing. I gotta go back to where I was, and I have to do this thing if I want to complete the quests the way I want to complete them, and I hate this, because it's distracting from what I want to be saying and doing, but I digress. So we see the rebel progress, and we see this entwinement, right? We see this entwinement of the progress of the rebels with their champions. The progress of the rebels in the Empire with their champions, their chosen champions. And that's kind of this thing, this mythological thing that we see. It's this return to the ancient ways of battle. That the champions fight, and the winner is the one who wins the battle, right? And this is written across a galaxy. This is with spaceships blowing up outside a space station, but it still comes down to these two people struggling against each other. And, of course, real war does not work like that necessarily, and if it does, that's fascinating, and I'd like to hear those stories, but I digress. So we see the progress of the rebels is stunted by manipulations by the Empire, and they hint at this overarching power that the Emperor has, and this amazing architecture that he's built, and the fact that he's kind of a load-bearing boss. Everything rests on his shoulders, and with that comes the power, the absolute power that we expect of the Sith. That this is a guy who doesn't necessarily scare Vader, but cows him. Something about the Emperor dominates Vader, and Vader has been the big bad for 2 movies now, established as this incredibly strong individual, and the first time we get the impression that he is completely subservient to the Emperor is in Empire, where he just kneels, and his whole, and this is the genius of the acting, the direction, and everything in there, this isn't where I want to be, that there's this sense of just complete domination in Vader's demeanor when he speaks to the Emperor in Empire and in Return of the Jedi. So we get this impression that, wow, this dude means business. This is no playing around, right? I have no idea where I'm going. So I hope y'all like watching me wander, because I'm wandering all over the place, both in the game and in my brain. So as we see this struggle happen between Vader and Luke, it's largely everything seems to be falling in place where, hey, maybe this is going to be a tetralogy, because, dude, this does not look good for the Rebels, and it doesn't look good for Luke, because he's dressed in black, just like the bad guys, and the bad guys seem to be winning. And we get to the linchpin point that Luke almost gives over. He's almost there. He is so frustrated and angry, and he's been pressed into this place where he is protecting what he holds most dear. And what's consistent branding? My distraction? Yes. Just to put that out there. But please clarify what you think is consistent branding, because I would like to know. And we see this, we see Luke in this place of almost complete surrender to his primal self. This surrender to the dark side, and at the last moment, something catches him. And he looks down at Vader after having hewed off his hand, and he realizes, oh, that's what I'm becoming. And this moment of deep empathy, of deep connection, of realization of becoming, of insight and foresight, hits like that. Ha! Yes. And so in this moment, we see the decision come to him. He can complete this task. And in doing so, will have the strength to proceed to protect or at least fight for what he wants. This temptation moment where this tempting moment where the Emperor is giving him the devil's deal. Where, you know what? This can all stop if you join me. But you have to kill Vader for that. And Luke's like, nope, not gonna do it. No, that's I feel the hook in that. I feel that you would own me, and I will not have it. I choose my ideals. I choose freedom. I choose liberty. I choose to be the better person in this moment. Nope, you failed. Throws away his weapon. This thing, this unique thing that he built himself, this symbol of the Jedi, he throws it away, symbolically. In theory, in that moment, rising above both the Jedi and the Sith, which that comes in later as well in terms of narrative in the movies, in just the movies, that shows up later, which is a brilliant thing that I've talked about before. He throws away the lightsaber, and for the first time, and it's again, the scene, the way the scene is done is brilliant, and this is why Return gets a lot of criticism because it has Ewoks in it, and it's marketing, but the story is still killer. And largely it hangs on Luke. and this is a pattern I'll touch on in a moment, in terms of the production of the movies, but Luke throws away the weapon, and in that moment, he's like, "No, I am a Jedi." And the Emperor's like, "So be it, Jedi." And that's in that moment, it's like, yes, there's this recognition that, okay, great, you've had your big damn hero moment. And for the first time in the entire series, we see this overt expression of the Force in lightning, in sorcery, in straight up just expressed power. And we're like, wow, whoa, holy crap. And even just that scene of throwing lightning out of his hands, the Emperor expresses this tremendous power that really, I feel that scale of power is what the other movies should have kept. This sense of, because, and I'll get back to that, it's another theme that shows up in other pieces of fiction, at least one big piece of fiction that I want to touch on. I'm actually going to switch, feed real quick, because I'm talking a lot, and I want to kind of focus on this a moment. Okay, so it's again, let's leave that discussion. Get away from the semantics for now, because I don't want to talk about the semantics. We're talking about the story, the arc, what these things symbolize, what they mean, and how these things work together to form this arc that Luke goes through. So the magic thing, we're setting that aside for now. Sure, it's magic. No, it's magic. Doesn't matter. It's immaterial right now what the nature of these powers are. They're powers. And this is the first big expression we see of these powers, is this figure who's kind of folded and crumpled and hollow, able to muster this tremendous power. And we see that same inversion we saw with Yoda of this person who is not physically powerful, somehow able to manifest tremendous power in the Force. And it's a real nice touchback to Empire, where we see Yoda do a similar demonstration, but not with violence, with utility, with connection, with a sense of doing something useful and healing and restorative and empowering, I think is the best word for it. And that is another touchstone that gets repeated later in a little bit of a clumsy way, I think, but I think it's a good touchstone to have. So we see this in this moment, that at this point, Luke has completed his arc. Luke's done. He's become the hero. He's become who he needs to be to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. So why is the Empire still winning? If Luke's arc is done, if Luke is the hero, what's going on here? Why is this not resolving the way we think it's going to resolve? He's thrown away his weapon. He's the big damn hero. What's going on? The Emperor starts just killing him. And in the novels, we actually learn that it calcifies Luke's bones, which is scientifically accurate. Being exposed to that much electricity ionizes your bones. Your bones become brittle because they can't hold on to both the potassium and the calcium at the same time. In Luke's case, it calcifies, makes them brittle. He has to go through a restorative therapy in the novels. They never touch on that in the movies. It's just a bit of geekery. There are obviously other problems that would happen with that kind of electrical torture that he goes through. But then we have this inversion. The bad guy gets up, Vader. And this is a spoiler. If you have not seen Return of the Jedi, go watch Return of the Jedi. It's on Disney Plus. And if you pirate, I don't condone pirating. However, you can see it. Getting zapped. Yes, it does, having been zapped. And I imagine being tased is nothing like getting hit with Force lightning. But I've been tased, and it hurt like a bitch. So, we see Vader rise from where Luke left him, handless, wire sparking at the end of a prosthetic arm. And he gets up and he just watches as Luke is electrified. And there is something, and here's another spoiler, we know at this point that Vader and Luke share the connection of father and son. That Vader is Luke's father. That he was once Anakin Skywalker. And yeah, I know a lot of people know that already, but for those who don't, You know, I gave you the spoiler warning. Yeah, we're talking. I mean, yeah, it's yeah. I don't know where you left off, but you know, we're at return. We're at the point where just shut up, Minty. Yeah, I know. It's kind of like when Martin Freeman was talking about the desolation of Smog, and was talking about the Battle of Five Armies, and somebody was like, "Spoiler alert!" and he was like, "The book is 70 years old. You need to chill." But I digress. So we see Vader rise. We know this connection between Vader and Luke, and we see Luke reach out to his father. And is like, please don't abandon me in my time of need. Luke does this amazing thing that doesn't get called out. I have never heard anybody call this out. He makes himself vulnerable. He says, do what you're going to do. I don't care. I am where I need to be. I am here. And I am facing you, and I do that on my terms. And it's not going to be with violence. Do what you want to do. And so in this moment of vulnerability, of course, the Emperor, being Sith, he takes advantage of it. He's just, like, laying him down. But Luke's goal is not... Sorry, pardon. Like I said, these stories get me. His arc is not the defeat of the Empire. Luke's arc is not about the defeat of the Empire. It's about transcendence. He has to transcend what he thought a hero was. Because throughout the other two movies, we see a lot of martiality. We see him go and try to save his friends because that's what he thinks heroes do. But in the end, he realizes, no. Whew. Sorry. Whew. Oh, this is getting me. In the end, he realizes, no, a hero gives somebody else a chance. A hero stands up and gives somebody else a chance to stand up as well. So he stands there in his full power and gets laid low by the Emperor. And then Vader stands up and he decides to become Anakin. He takes the opportunity Luke gives him, and he throws the Emperor into the Death Star. And of course, we talk about the metaphysics there of well, what actually destroyed the Death Star? Was it an insanely powerful sorcerer being thrown into the energy well? Or was it the rebellion hitting the power regulator? And could it be both? You know? And it's a both and kind of thing. It's a thing where both things need to happen in order for good to rise. In order for good to succeed, all the heroes have to succeed. And so Luke's goal is transcendence, to become more than what came before, more than he was before, more than anything. And we see this symbolically to a degree towards the end of the lightsaber fight between Luke and Vader. His vest falls open and underneath is white. This kind of nod to he's gone through this darkness, but he's coming out of it, and he's coming out of it different. This experience has deeply changed him. He's gone through the final part of his alchemy, and he is who he needs to be. And so we see him rescue Vader from the destruction of the Death Star, but this recognition at the end, as Vader lay dying, and Vader saying, "No, I'm who I was. I've gotten rid of something. I've cleared something." And what he cleared was the grief of the loss that we see in the prequels. This sense of, I need to control everything. I'm this deeply compassionate individual who's attached to everything, and finally he can let go and say, oh, because he had his son's example. His son stood there and said, I let go of everything because I can't control it. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. I can't control it. That's not the point. The point is I am better than I was. And could Luke have defeated the Emperor? No. That's my feeling. He couldn't have. Even with a lightsaber, doesn't matter. Couldn't have. He wasn't strong enough. Vader was. Only Vader could have taken out Palpatine. It was never about Luke taking that shot. But in order to give Vader the shot, Luke had to be a hero. So yeah, that's my take on Luke's arc, and yeah, like I said, there's a reason why I love this stuff, and a reason why I think it's a good thing to watch and study, not as necessarily a complex philosophical thing, because that's not what everything is for. I think we mistake what media is for a lot of times. Media isn't always to challenge us. Sometimes it's about nourishing. It's about giving us what we need to be a better person. And I think that's what Star Wars ultimately, in the stories that we look at, that's what Star Wars is about, is what does it take for us to be the better person and for the world to be better around us, for us to contribute to the world becoming better. And I don't think I have seen just about any piece of Star Wars media that, quality aside, that misses that point. Yes. Oh, I love those projections. Yeah. The idea of what happened if they actually, if the Jedi stopped being political. That's ultimately what would have happened, is the Jedi needed to be vulnerable, right? They needed to be politically vulnerable. They needed to give up their seat at the table politically in order to go back to the Force from whence they came. And I love all the stuff that talks about why Qui-Gon acted the way he did, what he saw, and why he was doing what he did, and what would have gone differently had Qui-Gon trained Anakin, or what would have happened differently if the Jedi Order recognized, oh, we lost somebody great in Qui-Gon, and we need to look at what's missing now. But that's not the point of that story, and I think the story as it is stands alone well, both to set up the stories that come after, and as this analysis of the need for vulnerability and compassion in everything, really, in politics, in martiality, in our warrior culture, in our in how we take care of ourselves. Yeah. Oh yeah. It is. It's a fantastic take on it. But to get back to a couple of things I touched on real quick before I get back to the game. So first of all, I talked about the storytelling, and there's an element that I think switches off in terms of what the movies or pieces of media get right versus what they get wrong, and especially the movies. And this is the pattern I see, is each trilogy gets something right, and it also gets something wrong, right? So the first trilogy concentrates so much on the mythology, we don't get nuance, we don't get a lot of world building, we don't get a lot of depth and consistency, right? And even after the first trilogy, we don't get a lot of depth and consistency, because Lucas didn't establish a canon. He just said, everybody go buck wild. I don't care. This is about having fun. I don't care. This is not about me being a director. I don't want to be a director. I want to be an editor, which is where we come into the prequel trilogy and the remasters, where it's all the digital effects and a bunch of different stuff, because he's an editor. He wants to edit. That's his drive. It's his constitution as an artist. He wants to edit. So he edits, and sometimes the edits aren't great, let's be honest. But his storytelling and his vision for the large arcing story is overall good. And that's something that I think we need to recognize, that, yeah, I think he got too fidgety with a lot of what he did with the prequel trilogy and the remaster of the original trilogy. And I do think it's what lost lost him a lot of his motivation, lost him a lot of fan backing, and why we thought it was a good thing when Disney took over, which, it's a mixed bag, of course. So that's the first thing, is I think each trilogy gets something right. The original trilogy was so seminal to sci-fi and fantasy that it's excellent. It's just you can't replace it. There's a lot of racism in the prequel trilogy that I could do without. So then the prequel trilogy, what the prequel trilogy does right is the politics, showing the scope of the Jedi, the scope of the Republic, showing the fall of the Republic, and what happens when this this order that's supposed to be more mystical, more service-oriented, more about a personal connection with things, becomes political, becomes dogmatic, becomes crystallized, which I've used those terms to describe other orders of spirituality and religion, so we'll leave it at that. I agree. Yes, absolutely. Because you have C-3PO, who was kind of that character. He was a caricature of a specific kind of character and served as comedic relief throughout the first trilogy. You didn't need to go as far afield as you did with Jar Jar. I agree. But that's where they went. We can criticize it all day. And yeah, it's one of the things the prequel trilogy got wrong. And largely, I think that overall, the handling of the Jedi in the prequel trilogy is very clumsy. That the politics was right, showing how these political structures fail is correct, showing how the order failed as a political structure is correct, because it favored dogma over connection. So that's what the prequel trilogy got right and wrong. And then the sequel trilogy went back to giving nuance to the Force, exploring the Force a little bit more, exploring some of the complexities of this what seems like a very stark good versus evil dynamic, and goes into some of what I've heard about KOTOR, but maybe we'll talk about that later, depending on if I get like what we see in KOTOR. But exploring the nature of the Force in terms of the dark side of the Force, that primal urge, the predator and prey, the emotional, the hormonal, the giving into emotions as power, which, if we look at it, Sith as narcissist, it's like lockstep. You know, my emotions are what give me power, you're in service to my emotions and what I want, I am giving into whatever drives and emotions I have in the moment, and that's what gives me my power. I'm going to use these things to magnify my power and intimidate people and throw them around. And if we look at the more subtle stuff in the first two movies, you know, Vader doesn't force choke people much. He doesn't have to. Because he's wandering around 2 meters tall, breathing through a rebreather, behind a mask, inhumanly powerful. You see him choke one dude out, and that's enough. You're done. Nope. This is good. I'm good. Nope. I will do what you say. Because emotionally, you know, he's just going to give in to a whim. And people bear witness to this. He will pick people up. You know, that could be cybernetics. That could be, and they talk about that his suit has cybernetics in it. That he's robotically, prosthetically enhanced in the suit. Kitty. And so you don't even necessarily see him use the Force. And you're still intimidated as crap about him. Because he has presence. So there's this narcissistic emotional abuse side to the Sith. And that's something that I think needs to get accented more and more in terms of what Sith look like and how they feel. The idea of the Sith just as a philosophy of attaining power, that's not it. That's not, like, the Sith are inherently abusive, are inherently nasty. So even if we take away the labels of good and evil, they're still not great people. We still don't want them in charge of things. And then you have the Jedi. And in the sequel trilogy, you see the rise. They talk about that the Sith, or the dark side of the Force, because they abandon some of the original labels to start telling a new story to a degree, but then go back and show the connection, which I think is really cool. So the dark side rises, and a light side champion rises to meet. And that's in The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi, they talk about that. Snoke talks about, I told Ren when he started gaining power that eventually his light side, a champion of the light, would rise to balance the Force, because the Force wants overall balance. It doesn't necessarily want a lack of movement, but it doesn't want this tremendous conflict and all this death either. It wants things to be moving in a smooth way. And that actually gets into some Trinitarian thought, oddly enough, but I digress. I'm going to stay away from that. No theology right now. We're going to talk about the fiction. So I think that the sequel trilogy really does well exploring that, and as well, the connection of, no matter how much you try to get away from those old labels, they're still a part of this story. They don't have to be it, but they're still going to be a component. And I think The Last Jedi ends on that positive note of, Rey is a Jedi, but not in name. That she's kind of this new beginning of learning how to be compassionately connected to those around you and emotionally connected to those around you without giving into those emotions, using them as points of connection and strength instead of taking strength from your relationships, your friendships, your allyships, and not letting them be levers against you, not being like Anakin did. So we see this complete fulfillment of the first two, and this it's why I don't mind the cheesy Rise of Skywalker. I don't mind the end of that, because to me it makes sense. It makes sense. It's mythological. This isn't supposed to be something that's, this isn't Shakespeare. It's myth. It's supposed to have rhythms. It's supposed to have callbacks and connections, and it's supposed to teach us something. It's not supposed to necessarily be an analysis and a deconstruction of itself, though it does that to a degree. So yeah, you asked about Luke's arc. I finished Luke's arc, went into another thing, but I digress. So I hope everybody got something out of that, and you enjoyed it at least, because I took you away from the game for a piece, which we will get back to